Hello, 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 and welcome once again to not a Prog Reborn, but welcome to my look over of the cards that have been previewed so far for the Final Fantasy Cross Magic the Gathering collaboration. My name is M. Kosler. I am a longtime Magic the Gathering player and longtime Final Fantasy enjoyer. I haven't played every game, so I'm not going to have the full breadth of knowledge, but as far as what I've seen from the spoilers, there hasn't really been a ton of like completely niche spoilers, other than things like Commune with Beavers, which is probably not that niche if you actually had played 2, but I have not. Most of my Final Fantasy experience comes from many hours of Final Fantasy 14, so I will have the most to say about any references that we see there, but I should be able to provide some context for what you see for in many of the other cards, and if not, then I will ask anybody who happens to be in chat or who happens to comment on the video to provide any context there. As far as the actual cards themselves, I'm going to be evaluating them mostly from a standard playability perspective, since we are looking at the product, the standard legal product. They have started to reveal some cards that are clearly meant for limited, and we'll still end up looking at those just because I want to review everything that has been posted so far. If you would like to catch up to where we are at, the last time that I did a standard legal preview review, that's all the cards that are in the FIN set rather than the FIC set, you'll need to go to, I believe it was marked, I believe it was day 1 of my videos. If you check in the live tab of this channel, there should be VODs. And I believe it's day 1 when we last looked at standard legal spoilers. So we're catching up since we did the last few days looking at the big commander drop, and we exclusively looked at, in that commander drop, the cards that were part of FIC, the commander specific cards, the non-standard legal cards. We're going to grab all the cards that happen to be spoiled in those commander products that are standard legal, along with many cards that have been spoiled that are just by various content creators out there. Depending on how long we're going, I might end up pulling up some of the Through the Ages prints. Those are the cards that'll show up in the FCA set. Those are mostly reprints, and it's mostly going to be me commenting on the art more than its playability, because they're known quantities. But yeah, with all that spiel out of the way, let's go ahead and I think for here it should be in collector number order. So go ahead and reveal here what we've seen so far. So Ultima, Origin of Oblivion, For 5 generic, we have a legendary creature god at rare. They are a 4/4 flyer. Whenever Ultima attacks, put a blight counter on target land. For as long as that land has a blight counter on it, it loses all land types and abilities and has tap, add a colorless, and then whenever you tap a land for colorless, add an additional colorless. So, a pretty neat card. 5 mana 4/4 flyer, decent stat wise. If it didn't have flying, then it's probably a little too weak. But a 4 power flyer that dodges, dodges a lot of the removal in the format. Dodges nowhere to runs, dodges your shocks and your lightning helixes and your lightning strikes and etc. Is a decent body, and the ability itself is, both abilities are pretty nice. If you get to the point where you can attack with Ultima, then you can start either turning lands that you previously were using to tap for colored mana into blight lands, which would then tap for double, or you can start turning off your opponent's lands, turning off their access to particular colors. Given the standard environment that we're in, especially with the printing of things like Starting Town, people might be more incentivized to try 3 color piles and even 4 color piles. So they're likely going to end up, splashing a particular color, or not having that many sources of a particular color, and having Ultima be able to turn those off is pretty good. It can hose people who rely a lot on verges and a lot on the surveil lands as their main source of lands with a particular type. So things like Jeskai Control play a ton. They don't play a ton of fast lands. They play a ton of verges, and then a ton of surveil lands. And so, depending on their draw, they could end up with a draw where they only have one, Thundering Falls or one Meticulous Archive, and you can smack that and then turn off all the verges. Not literally turn them off. They'll still tap for one of their colors, but they won't have access to the second color, and that can be pretty devastating, given the way that a lot of those Jeskai Control lists are built. It ends up turning off the ability to play a lot of their counter spells, the ability to play lightning helixes, etc. The big problem here is it is an attack trigger. It's not like a Titan where it's got an ETB and attack trigger. So you do have to get to a point where you are attacking to start turning off people's lands. You can kind of, if you're really wanting to lean into pseudo land destruction, you can kind of pair this with the 4/4 dragon from Tarkir, where that one hits non-basics, and then you follow up with Ultima to try and start hosing the rest. But Ultima is, turning off their lands from colored mana rather than actually destroying them. So it'll take a little while to actually completely hose your opponent, and they can always draw out of it in that scenario. What's important to note as well is that whenever you tap a land for colorless, you add additional. That does make Ultima have sort of a pseudo enter the battlefield effect, that if you have lands that tap for colorless, they immediately get turned on to tap for double. There are a lot of good colorless lands in the format right now. Fountain Ports, Mirexes, Demolition Fields, things like that, as well as we're getting the I forget what it's called, but it's the Radiant Fountain that's a town coming in this set. Plus starting town itself, you can tap it for colorless, so there's going to be a lot there. Also note, any of your pain lands that you're playing will tap for can tap for colorless, so those can be on. So you don't have to play Ultima in a colorless deck. You can play it. There's a decent number of sort of like green ramp Ugin decks or mono white control Ugin decks that I could certainly see Ultima slotting into. Ultima is a colorless spell, so if you have Ugin in play, you can use Ultima to get that cast trigger and nail somebody's colored non-land permanent. So I think this card will see play in those type of decks specifically. It is a little unfortunate that unlike something like Forsaken Monument, which was I think back in like Oath of the Gatewatch, or maybe even further back then, that your only lands that tap for colorless tap for an additional. So this isn't going to make your Iron Crags or your Hedron Archives tap for more. But still, I think Ultima has a good chance of seeing play in those, big mana Ugin decks. That'll be fun to see. Next up, we have Orin's Inspiration. For 2 and a white, we have an instant at uncommon. It says attacking creatures get +2/+0 until end of turn, and has flashback for 2 white. This is almost certainly only a limited Anthem effect. And as far as limited anthems, this is kind of the going rate. Getting flashback on one of these can be nice because you can use it to, whittle down your opponent's blockers, and then when they don't have that much of a board left over, you immediately flash it back the next turn to hopefully, swing out and win the game. Doesn't give any toughness, so you do have to be in a good situation where you're either willing to make these trades or have some better guarantee that your creatures are going to survive. But still a perfectly reasonable limited anthem. More limited cards, we see Cloudbound Moogle. Oh, and as far as the reference here, I should have talked about reference to Ultima. This Ultima is from the big bad from Final Fantasy 16. And the reference here, especially the quote, it's you and the team getting ready for the final battle against Sin. Well, I guess it's not the final battle against Sin. Well, maybe it is. Maybe the quote is in the final battle against Sin. I can't remember if it's you. The depiction seems like it's you still on the airship, trying to break through the outer wall of Sin so that you can get inside. But I can't remember when exactly this quote happens. Back to Cloudbound Moogle. This is reference to the Sea of Clouds. I can't remember the exact zone now that I'm thinking about it. It's the zone where you meet Hraesvelgr in Final Fantasy 14. The Mughals from the Heavensward expansion rather than the Mughals that you see in the Black Shroud. But for 3 white, we get a creature Mughal at common. It is a 2/3 flyer that when this creature enters, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and it has plane cycling for 2 generic. And this is our first instance of land cycling. So what this means is you can pay 2 and discard this card to search your library for a plains. Note that it just says plains. It doesn't say specifically basic plains. So I don't think we've seen non-basic, fetchable lands out there. But in case they do, or in case you play this for some reason you decide to play this in a commander deck or something like that, that is something to note. As far as playability, it's been a while since I've really been playing a ton of limited. Back in the day, a 5-mana 3/3 flyer was perfectly reasonable. This is a little lower on the stat line, but it can become a 3/4 if you decide to put the counter on itself, or you can put that counter on something that doesn't have summoning sickness and try to swing in further for there. It's I think it's perfectly reasonable. Not really going to bring the house down. And the fact that in the bad scenarios for it, you can turn it into your land drop is fine there. So I think it's a reasonable limited card. More reasonable limited cards, we have a Curl, 1 on white for a 2/2 creature cat beast at common, and it has for 1 on white and tap this to tap target non-enchantment creature. Curls are all over the place. This one's from 15 specifically, but they've been enemies in the Final Fantasy series for many years, maybe even all the way back to the first one. Tappers have been, depending on the speed of the format, have been unplayable to very good. This one is kind of on the expensive end for a tapper, having to pay 1 and a white to tap something. And it's notable. I understand the implication here, but you're not able to tap your opponent's summons. There are a few, we've seen at least one non-rare summon that, at least I've seen it as I was putting these slides together, but I imagine that you'll be seeing summons relatively regularly. Not only has to be something to draft a rare. Actually, I guess there are 2, because there's Shiva from way back when, and then we got another new one coming up. And if this was able to tap those summons, then your summons would be really bad, because you would just use Curl to most often prevent the one attack that you would be able to get off of that summon. Sure, they would still get sort of the lore counter effects as it goes through each chapter, but it's good that it says tap target non-enchantment creature from a limited perspective. Otherwise, I would think summons would be unplayable in limited with a tapper like this at common. But really, the outside of having that out clause there, it's still really dependent on the speed of the format. If it's super fast, then having to pay 2 mana for a tapper, or having to pay 2 mana to use the tap ability probably is going to be too slow. But if the format is is slow, then this is a great way to get your flyer in or stop your opponent from getting their flyer over. So it remains to be seen on how good this card is going to be in limited. More limited cards, though this one has some potential in standard. We have Fate of the Suncrist. For 4 and a white, we have an instant at common. This spell costs 2 less to cast if it targets a tapped creature and destroy target non-land permanent. This is one of the references that I'm not too familiar with. I didn't play a ton of 12, so someone will have to provide the context here. From a Magic perspective, you know, it's a pretty 3 mana to destroy, you know, a creature that's likely a creature that is currently attacking you or had attacked you last turn. Is you know, fine, but having this as an out to problematic non-land permanents such as your summons, or such as you know, like banishing light effects or whatnot. Having a very flexible removal like this is decent. Paying a full 5 for it is pretty much on the expensive end, but you know, beggars really can't be choosers in draft here. In standard, the only use case for this card that it could potentially see play is in Beanstalk decks, domain decks that use Up the Beanstalk, because it's another card that is technically 5 mana value, but you can cast it for cheaper at instant speed. A lot of times they played things like Ride Down as an answer for you know, for creatures coming in. Ride Down is probably better. I shouldn't say probably. It definitely is better if the meta is much more like mice aggro based. This does have a chance though in metas that are like the current meta, where you're more worried about something like a Corey Steelcutter than you are worried about one individual creature hitting you for a ton. So there's a chance that this sees some play in standard if those Beanstalk decks come back into vogue. But beyond that, it's there for limited. Next up, we have Mughul's Valor. For 3 white. We have an instant at rare that says for each creature you control, get a 1/2 white Mughal creature token with lifelink. Then creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. The reference here, you can even see Terra in the background, sort of knocked out as she was cornered by Narshi town guards, and then fell through the floor of the cave very early on in the game. This is where Locke gets help from the Mughals to defeat the guards that are coming after her, so that she can escape from Narshi, and you know, you can get on with the start of the game. As far as a card, like the actual evaluation of this card, this is almost unplayable. I shouldn't even say almost. This is almost like blank cardboard for many situations. So, you know, the best, you got to think about things as what's the best case scenario, what's the worst case scenario, what if I draw this off the top of my deck, or what if I have this in my opening hand, right? in the best case scenario is, you know, you've got a big board, your opponent plays, you've got a big board and your opponent plays a Wrath, and then you go boom, Moogles of Valor, you know, they play a Day of Judgment, so everything survives, and I get a bunch of additional 1/2s that I'm then going to swing for super lethal the next turn, right? But the one in that sort of contrived scenario, you're playing a deck that is heavily playing toward the board, with a large number of creatures, that is playing a 5-drop that is only reactive rather than proactive. That's aggressive decks can play reactive spells like this, but it's usually things like a Snakeskin Veil or like an Overprotect, something that's going to a Shard Mage's Rescue, a cheap spell that you can play alongside. You know, you have 4 mana and you go 3-drop. I'm going to hold up my Shard Mage's Rescue, or 3-drop and I'm going to hold up my Snakeskin Veil. Not I'm just going to sit there with 5 mana open, like, and expect my opponent to not understand what's going on. And if your board has, you know, if you're on the draw and your opponent went, or not even if you're on the draw, if your opponent goes, you know, turn 4 land Day of Judgment, and you sitting there with this Moogles of Valor in your hand, it's not like I can play this Moogles of Valor and generate these Moogles. I have to rebuild my board before I get these Moogles back, or before I even get access to any of these Moogles. So if this card guaranteed some number of Moogles, then I think it would be pretty good. But the fact that you can just completely whiff with this card means it's unplayable. It's a Commander card, and even in Commander, I don't think that there are a lot better options in white. One was even in the Precon, Clever Concealment to protect your board than something like a Moogles Valor. So the flavor of this is super cool. I love the scene that they're depicting, but this card I think is pretty bad. Next up, we have Dreams of Laguna. For 1 and a blue, we get an instant at common, and it has Surveil 1, then draw a card, and it has a flashback of 3 and a blue. And I realized that I didn't talk about what flashback is. It's just you can pay the flashback cost in order to replay this card from your graveyard 1 additional time. And then Surveil is, you can look at the top card of your library, and you can decide either to leave it on top or put it into your graveyard. This is borderline playable in like a blue-based control deck, but I think it's competing with a lot of other cards, and so I think you would really want some graveyard synergy in your control deck if you're going to want to play this rather than play something like a Deduce, or even like a Think Twice, or even like an Opt. And in current standard, you don't even really see a ton of blue-based control decks that are playing 2 mana, instant speed draw spells outside of Deduce, and that's very, very rare these days. Most of the time, people are just playing 4 copies of stock up and some number of copies of Meringue River Regent, which gets them access to things like gets them access to the Omen, the Coil and Catch, which is also a draw 3 and discard 1. So this isn't the worst card in the world for a control strategy, but it's outclassed in current standard. Next up, we have Matoya, Archon Elder. For 2 in a blue, we have a legendary creature, Human Warlock. At rare, she is a 1/4 that says whenever you scry or surveil, draw a card. And for whatever reason, this is the quality of the image that I was able to pull off of Scryfall. So sorry about how ugly this one looks. Matoya is a character from FF1. But this is her depiction as she is in FF14. She is the teacher, the trainer, the guide, the mentor of Y'shtola, and plays a good role in at several points during the MSQ. As far as the ability, whenever you scry or surveil, draw a card, that's pretty powerful, but it's on a 3-mana 1/4 body, so it's got a, Matoya's got a fat butt, but she's not really trading with anything or even like really preventing your opponent from attacking into her, outside of like very, very rare occasions. And I think because she's not really doing too much to impact the board right at the start, she's not, I don't think she's really that playable. For 3 drops, in blue, like if you're wanting to play a creature spell in some sort of control strategy, you can probably, you have things like Tempest Djinn, you have things like, well, I guess it's not Tempest Djinn, Haughty Djinn is the one in standard right now, but I think Tempest Djinn is also in standard in Foundations, but it isn't good enough anymore. You have things like Abhorrent Oculus, which is obviously a little harder to do, to get to, but you're probably just going to play your Bezes, you're just going to play your Shikos if you're in Jeskai, you're just going to play your Meringue River Regents, etc., rather than Matoya. Turning an opt into a draw 2 is cool and all, but I think the format is too fast for Matoya, so unfortunate. Next up, we have the Prima Vista. For 4 and a blue, we have a legendary artifact vehicle at uncommon. It is a 5/3 with flying and crew 2, so a relatively cheap crew cost for this vehicle. But it also has, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if at least 4 mana was spent to cast it, the Prima Vista becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. When I initially read this card, I thought this card had a decent option of being a good control finisher, but the order that things happen when you cast these spells means that it's not going to work out the way that you want. What I was hoping, and I don't know if there's really a way that you could word this, what I was hoping is, 4 mana spell spent to cast, you play some sort of, you play a Day of Judgment, or you play a Sunfall, and then this swings in on the empty board. But given the way that the triggers would happen, since that's on cast of the non-creature spell, this would turn into a creature and then get swept away by the sweeper. You can still play it in some sort of like tap out control style thing. Maybe you play it in like a Battlefront deck, or like a United Battlefront deck, but then you're playing this card that doesn't get hit by United Battlefront. So I think ultimately, while it seems like it can be fun, I think ultimately this is there for limited control decks, where you're like we've seen already with the white removal spell, things like that. Your removal's going to be a little bit more overcosted, and so you're more likely going to be able to just turn this on as you're playing 1-for-1 removal, or maybe even flashing back Dreams of Laguna, things like that, and turning this on incidentally. Next up, I think that there was, as far as I could see, there was only the Japanese version of this card, but this is Quistis from FF8. She is 2 and a blue, legendary creature, human something, at uncommon. She is a 2/2 that has, when she enters the battlefield, you may exile, I think it's, you may cast target instant or sorcery card in a graveyard, and you can use, yeah, I think that's the wording of it. You can cast a target instant or sorcery card in a graveyard, and you can use any colored mana to cast it, and then if you do cast it, exile it as it resolves. So basically a slightly overcosted Snapcaster Mage, but you can, she doesn't have flash, and but you can hit a spell in your opponent's graveyard to have access to, which is why you have all the hoops about you can use any color mana to cast it. I think it's because she's kind of a blue mage in FF8. That's sort of the play that they're going for, kind of like what we saw the other day with the blue mage's rod from the 14 commander deck. You're playing your opponent's spells, and so it's interesting. It only hits instants and sorceries. It's not like you can play anything. You do have to pay the full cost for the spell, and I don't think that it exiles the spell unless you actually can cast it. So you can't. I don't think that you can use this as just, incidental graveyard hate. I'm gonna snipe my opponents. This town ain't big enough before they can bring it back with Stormcase's talent. You could do it if you have the mana over to actually cast it, but you can't just use it like proactively to exile something from their graveyard. I don't think that she quite makes it, but this is again another card that's kind of like just on the outside looking in the standard. In draft, I think that she's completely playable, right? Boards, depending on the speed of the format, get into a board stall, you can recast some removal spell that you played earlier, or even steal some removal spell of your opponent's to try and break up the board stall. I think a decent card in draft, but on the outside looking in for standard. Next up, we have Realms Sketching. For 2 blue, we have a sorcery at uncommon. And it says, create a token that's a copy of target artifact, creature, or land. I believe there are a few 4-mana clone effects in standard right now. I know there's one in Aether Drift. And I think there's probably others. It is creating a token copy rather than like normal clones where you're creating like an actual creature that's a clone. So you can do some sort of shenanigans with things like Caretaker's Talent in order to copy the tokens, or 3 Blind Mice in order to copy the tokens. I think really the main draw for this that's funny. The main desire for this is in Commander, where this is one of only a few, maybe even only 2 spells that allow you to copy a land, which, you know, depending on what you're copying, and it doesn't say, this isn't a clone that only targets things that you control. So depending on what you're copying in, with that, you can get some insane value from there. But standard playability, we haven't really seen any of the other clone effects see that much play, and so I think this just falls in the line with those other clone effects. I know I should think on this. There's the Gear Hulk, the Rakdos Gear Hulk from Aether Drift. Let me double check on that. Let me actually look that up, because that actually might be interesting. So the Rakdos Gear Hulk. So set Drift Gear Hulk. I don't remember if that has to be creatures. Yeah, it is creature cards. So this doesn't go into that. There was like a silly combo deck that people tried at the start of Aether Drift, and since this only can hit creatures, it's not going to be since that can only hit creatures, you can't put this into that deck. Next up, we have Retrieve the Esper. For 3 and a blue, we get a sorcery at common. It is create a 3/3 blue robot warrior artifact creature token. Then if this spell was cast from a graveyard, put 2 +1/+1 counters on that token, and you can flash this back for 5 and a blue, which is how you would get the additional +1/+1 counters. Most of the time. We just saw Quistis that could also do it. You know, this is depicting the very beginning of FF6, so another fairly iconic point in the game. I don't think we see Terra specifically, but one of these folks is Biggs, another one of these is Wedge, and they're in Narshi trying to find Valigarmanda. As far as playability, this is pretty straightforward limited card. The fact that it's 4 mana, we just saw the Prima Vista cares about non-creature spells that cost at least 4. So this is a way to trigger sort of that archetype in there. But that's really where this card lives and dies. It's not close enough to standard playable. Speaking of things that care about spending at least 4 mana, we have Sahagin. For 1 and a blue, we get a creature Merfolk Warrior at common, It is a 1/3 that whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if at least 4 mana was spent to cast it, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, and it can't be blocked this turn. There is a a tier 2-ish Merfolk deck out there. There's the from Dominaria United, I think there's the 2-mana Lord out there. There's some decent Merfolk synergy because you have that plus all the Merfolk in Ixalan, plus there was the Merfolk Semi-Lord from that with exhaust from Aether Drift to go there. I think this is probably a little on the weaker end for cards that you would play in that deck in Standard, but it's an option. And then as far as Limited goes, not terrible, especially in that archetype. Being able to, if you can consistently trigger this, you'll be able to consistently get in damage against your opponent, and clears out board stalls. That this kind of blue card that can get unblockable has been part of limited archetypes for a while now. So good to see another one coming. As far as it's depicting, Sagan have been in Final Fantasy, just like Curls. They've been in Final Fantasy for as enemies to fight for forever. These are the 14 Sahagan. I think this is in Western Thanalan, where their spawning bed, not Thanalan, Western Lenosha, their spawning bed, is this looks like the coastline over there. So another pretty poor quality image here, but we have Valkyrie aerial unit. I said it like there was a comma there. Valkyrie aerial unit. For 5 blue, we have an artifact creature construct at uncommon. It is a 5/4 with flying that enters the battlefield and surveils 2, but it also has affinity for artifacts. This is our first reference to affinity for artifacts. So this spell costs 1 generic less to cast for each artifact you control. So this doesn't reduce colored mana that is required to spend on this. So the cheapest you can get this to is for blue, so 2 total blue mana. But if you can get it for that, this is a pretty decent card. If a 2 mana 5/4 flyer, that's nothing to scoff at. The problem, I think, in Standard is it's going to be pretty difficult to consistently and early enough get this Valkyrie aerial unit cheap enough that you feel good about putting this into your deck. You do have, there's the nesting bot from Aether Drift as a 1-drop artifact creature. You do have Novice Inspector, which generates a clue token, or Spyglass Siren, which generates a map token on turn 1. So you could try to put this into there's like on the fringes of Standard, there's like the Azorius Bunnycorn, Azorius Game Objects deck, where you're just trying to put a bunch of different things into play, which means that your Bunnycorn is going to be very, very large. And you can consider playing something like this in there. There are other affinity for artifact blue creatures that came out in Aether Drift. I think it's called Memory Guardian. So they're still trying to support that archetype. I I just don't know if you can get to this being cheap enough, fast enough for it to really see play. I think at 4 mana, this is fine, if a little underwhelming. 3 mana, this is pretty good. 2 mana, this is obviously great. Once you get beyond 4 mana, you're gonna feel pretty disappointed about this card. So keep it in mind if they keep printing affinity for artifacts, or if they make more and more things that are really cheap artifacts or generate a lot of artifacts early in the game, because then this and the other affinity for artifact creatures could become a real deck. But right now, I think it doesn't quite make it there. Next up, we have Albed Salvagers for 2 and a black. We have a creature, human, artificer, warrior. It's really multiple creatures, but at uncommon, it's a 2/3, which whenever this creature or another creature or artifact you control dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So this is a payoff for some sort of aristocrats style strategy. In standard, we have Ellis Ilkor. We have there's the one in a black vampire from Foundations that does very similar things to this. The one big difference here is this one also cares about artifacts dying in addition to creatures. But I think the big problem here is a lot of the decks, a lot of those aristocrat style decks in standard right now, they play a couple of copies of things that are 3 mana, but I feel like you need, if the cards that you are going to play at 3 mana need to be super impactful, and this doesn't quite make it, because otherwise you want most of your deck to be at 2 mana, because Raise the Past, which came out in Foundations, only brings back creatures of mana value 2 or less. So I think this is another card on the outside looking in. Maybe if you want to try and build like a little bit more of a mid-rangey version of aristocrats that isn't relying on sort of these big Raise the Past combo turns, you can go that route. But just trying to slot this into the existing aristocrats decks, I don't think it quite makes it. So next up, we have Evil Reawakened for 4 and a black. We have a sorcery at uncommon. It says return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it. And here we've got X-Death showing itself to Galuf. For a long time, 5 mana was kind of the standard rate for reanimation, but Duskmourn and Foundations gave us 3 total, technically. 2 of them are actual 4 mana reanimation spells in Ride of the Moth and Zombify. One of them, Valgavoth's Chosen, is kind of technically 5 mana if you want to do it all at once, but it's a 1 mana creature that has a 4 mana activation to sacrifice it to reanimate something from your graveyard. some versions of like Rakdos Reanimator play Rakdos Joins Up, which is another 5 mana reanimation spell in standard. But Rakdos Joins Up has, while I don't remember the exact wording on Rakdos Joins Up, I think it only reanimates legendaries. Your main reanimation targets are going to be legendaries. Your Atraxas, your Italis, your Valgavoths. And the benefit that you get from something like Rakdos Joins Up is way better than just the 2+1/+1 counters you get here on Evil Reawakened. So not quite there for standard, but could be decent in limited. We saw the Malboro card that was spoiled very early on. I think it was spoiled during the PAX panel. Is a great reanimation target in limited. You cycle it away for swamp cycling and then reanimate it back and get all those ETBs. We saw the Cloudkin Moogle. I think that's a pretty weak on the weaker end, but you know, it would be, maybe not. It would be if you just put everything onto it, it would be a 5/6 flyer. So maybe not. On there, and then as well, you know, you're depending on how many uncommon summons there are, those summons are always going to be going into the graveyard, so you should have targets to grab outside of those scenarios that we just talked about. So I think it's a pretty decent limited card if the format is slow enough to allow for this kind of strategy. But not there for standard. Next up, we have Jekt Reluctant Guardian. For 3 and a black, we have a legendary creature, Human Warrior, at rare. Jekt is a 4/3 with Menace, and he has, whenever Jekt deals combat damage to a player, you may exile it, then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. So let's not think about the other half first before we let's think about just Jekt before we think about the other half. Just thinking about Jekt, a pretty weak card. 4 mana for a 4/3 with Menace. It dies to, not going to die to shock at least, but it is going to die to Lightning Strike, Lightning Helix, Nowhere to Run, a lot of the removal that gets played in this format. And at 4 mana, it's competing with things like Sheoldred, Archfiend of the Dross. Even in this set, I think Kuja is generically better than something like Jekt, because Kuja, at least, if your opponent's holding up mana to shoot your 4 mana spell, then sure, it's going to work to cut down, or not cut down, to go for the throat your 4 mana spell, then sure. But if they're tapping out and you're tapping out, at least Kuja will generate a little wizard token for you. So just thinking about the front side, pretty darn weak. So let's look at the back side. Vraska's Final Aeon. It's a legendary enchantment creature, Saga Nightmare. So it has and it's a 7/7 with Menace, so it retains Menace, and it has each opponent discards a card and you draw a card, and it has for the first 2 chapters, and then it has for its ultimate, for its overdrive, however you want to think about it, it has each opponent sacrifices 2 creatures of their choice. The backside is pretty powerful, right? 7/7 Menace immediately sort of get a 2-for-1 by forcing your opponent to discard a card, and you draw a card. You get that twice. Couple of problems here. So with Ject, you're not transforming. Well, one, you've already gone past combat, because in order to flip from Ject to Braska's final Aeon, you have to have dealt combat damage to a player. So the fact that Ject has Menace does mean that if you get to a point where you can untap with Ject on the battlefield, there's a better than nothing chance that he's going to actually get in. But you're not going to be able to get in. You're only going to be able to get in one attack with your 7/7 Menace creature. So I feel like even though the backside is pretty powerful, you're getting a lot of 2-for-1s, things like that. You're making it awkward, really awkward for your opponent to play into Braska's final Aeon, because they're going to end up losing a lot of their board if it gets all the way to the end there. I think the hoops that you have to jump through are far too much to get the value here. So some comments from the chat. A Hill Giant with Menace. Yep, I agree. A Hill Giant has to touch them. Trades down with because of 3 toughness, 100%. And even if even with the 3 toughness thing, a lot of the 3 drops that see decent play in standard have death touch already, so gonna die for there. And then, yeah, so swinging on turn 5, opponent probably has a 4/4 and anything else to block the token, and you're trading at best there with a 4-drop. Yeah, I think you got to jump through too many hoops in order to get to Braska's final Aeon. Somebody else is pointing out Lightning Greaves. I'm mostly thinking about this from a standard perspective. I think in Commander, you're much more likely to be able to get the flip, because there's going to be somebody in your pod who isn't playing to the board or doesn't have enough creatures to block. They just have one thing out there, and so you're gonna be able to get the flip over. And then in Commander, each opponent discards a card. You're getting a lot more value from Ject in Commander. But I think from a standard perspective, pretty weak card. Not really gonna see play over the other black 4-drops in the format that see play. Next up, we have Namazu Trader for 3 and a black. We have a creature, Fish Citizen, at common. It's a 3/4 with, when this creature enters, you lose 1 life and create a treasure token. And then whenever this creature attacks, you may sacrifice another creature or artifact. If you do, surveil 2. Pretty straightforward limited card, but at common, having repeatable sack outlet, you pair this with the Albed scavengers, I should say, or maybe they're salvagers. The Albed card that we saw earlier, you can sort of get your little engine going here. I do like that it sort of gives you a 1-shot ramp to get even further up, though you are already at 4 mana. That treasure token technically is fuel for itself. If you're really needing to search for something, you can just sacrifice the treasure to its own attack trigger to get that surveil to try to find a removal spell or a flyer or whatever have you. But yeah, we're really here for limited. As far as the reference here, the Namazu all over the place in God, what's the name of the capital city in the east in Final Fantasy 14? Starts with a K. whatever, all over the place over there, and in Doma and the surrounding areas there. A pretty recognizable creature, pretty recognizable catfish. Next up, we have Sephiroth's Intervention. For 3 and a black, we get an instant at common. Destroy target creature, you gain 2 life. You know, limited removal. 4 mana, relatively overcosted even for limited, but we have seen that there is a 4 mana value, or spending 4 mana for non-creatures matters archetype with a couple of cards like Prima Vista and Sahagin. So the fact that it's 4 mana might end up being a benefit for that scenario. Yeah, totally fine limited card, obviously depicting a very famous moment in Final Fantasy VII. Next up, we have Shambling Seath, or Seath, I think that's how they say it. For 2 and a black, we have a creature Mutant Horror at uncommon. It's a 3/3 that enters the battlefield tapped, and then whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you may pay black. If you do, return this card from your graveyard to your hand. So it's fine. The fact that it enters tapped is pretty annoying, but you know, it's your reassembling skeleton with extra steps kind of thing for limited. You can just constantly sacrifice this to the Namazu in order to gain value. You know, it's fine for a sacrifice strategy. Next up, Shinra Reinforcements. For 2 and a black, we have a creature Human Soldier at common. It is a 2/3 with when this creature enters, mill 3 cards and gain 3 life. So, you know, given that we have, what was Evil Reawakened? No, that was uncommon. But even then, you know, a way to fill your yard if you have any sort of graveyard synergy, like putting a reassembling CF from your library into your graveyard, a little bit of life gain, pretty not going to see any sort of standard play, but you know, something that might be the glue together for a graveyard strategy in limited. We haven't seen a ton out there yet to know how viable graveyard strategies might be in limited, but this is something to keep an eye on. It is at common, so you're probably going to get a couple copies of this for your deck. Next up, Undercity Dire Rat. For 1 and a black, we have a creature Rat at common. It is a 2/2 with when this creature dies, create a treasure token. You know, more sacrifice fodder, turns into a treasure. As far as standard goes, I think there are some very fringe tier 3, mostly meme decks that have that play the Sibsig ceremony, that like these creatures that generate a treasure when they die, so that you can keep chaining them, keep getting additional it's the 3 mana green creature, 3 mana green spider from Foundations. Keep getting card draw off of that. So if that strategy ever becomes like better, then this is an option for a deck like that. That's really the only place I think that I would see this card in standard. As far as limited, like I said, you know, it's a fine sacrifice fodder to get a little bit of treasure. It's a bear. What are you going to complain about? Next up, we have Vincent Valentine. For 2 black, we have a legendary creature assassin at rare. Vincent is a 2/2 that whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a number of +1/+1 counters on Vincent equal to that creature's power, and then whenever Vincent Valentine attacks, you may transform it. So again, think about just the first half before we think about the back half here. And the first half is really weak. In my opinion. 4 mana for a 2/2. Dies to, we talked about how Jekt dies to a lot of removal in the format. This dies to even more. It dies to the removal that the current best deck in the format plays 4 copies of, with Burst Lightning. So like, you really have to wait till turn 5 and hope that your opponent has something that you can cut down on top of it, or wait till turn 6 and play this alongside, you know, a go for the throat. But, and sure, right, you're gonna get a lot of +1/+1 counters depending on what you're killing, but again, that's a lot of hoops to jump through for a 4 mana 2/2. So the backside better be insane. And so let's take a look. One thing to note here: this is an attack trigger rather than Jekt's combat damage trigger. So you can flip this before blocks are declared. So whatever the other side's gonna get. Whatever the other side's going to give you is what you're attacking as. And also note, unlike Jekt, when you're flipping this, it is not an exile and then return to the battlefield transformed. So any +1/+1 counters that you had on Vincent from, you know, when it was on this side are going to stay on that creature. So the backside, Galleon Beast, legendary creature Werewolf Beast. It now has base power and toughness of 3/2. It has trample and lifelink, and then when it dies, return it to the battlefield tapped, reminding you that would mean it would return to the battlefield face up. So, you know, it's sort of like a build. You're going to build up to this really powerful creature, you know, over. If you leave it on the Vincent side, get a couple kills in, and then flip it over, and you have this big trampling lifelink thing that's going to really keep you in a game. But so many things had to have gone right in order for that to happen. The front side is way too weak compared to the rest of the 4 drops that you have in black and standard. I don't think that this makes it. And I'm not really going to evaluate rares for limited, because you're not going to see them enough to really for them to really be. Most of the time they're good enough in limited. But when you're at rare and mythic level, you're thinking about, hey, how good is this going to be in standard? And this is not. This is probably close to the Mughal Struggle, or whatever that card was called, Mughal's Valor, as like the worst rare in the set. Next up, we got a pretty playable uncommon with Freya Crescent. For a single red, we had a legendary creature, Rat Knight. She is a 1/1 at uncommon. She has jump, so she's a Dragoon in FF9, so like all the other Dragoons that we've seen in the set. She has flying during your turn, and then you can tap her for red, but you can only spend this mana to cast an equipment spell or activate an equip ability. So in Standard, I think, at least so far, there aren't really, outside of Corey Steelcutter, there aren't really a ton of good equipment. Hopefully this set brings us other good equipment, and there have been some decent equipment that have been previewed with the job selectability that we haven't gotten to yet. But if we're just thinking about like Corey Steelcutter, I don't think Freya belongs in that deck. You're wanting to play Monastery Swift Spear. You're wanting to play Storm Chaser's Talent. You're not you're not even really like paying equip costs. They don't to put the Corey Steelcutter on anything because it's auto attaching to some monk that gets generated by the flurry. But if they preview, as they preview more and more job select equipment, keep Freya in mind as just like that math that you do when you think about Llanowar elves. Okay, is this green 3-drop really a 2-drop? Is this equipment really a 2-drop because of Freya? And if that hits critical mass, then Freya might end up being pretty good in the Standard. I think she's probably incredible in like Boros equipment decks in Commander, and probably going to be a fairly chase card for that type of format or that type of Commander deck. But I think that she is very playable in Standard if we get enough 3-drop equipment that is at least red adjacent to play. So keep it in mind. Next up, we have item shopkeep for 1 and a red. Creature human citizen at common. She's a bear. She's a 2/2, and whenever you attack, attacking equipped creature gains menace until end of turn. Limited card. You gotta remember and realize that most of the equipment that's going to be played in this set, even in the limited environment, is going to be pre-attached to something because of job select, so you're not having to jump through a lot of the hoops that you normally think of when you think of equipment to get it onto something to then give it menace. You're just sort of, hey, my job select creatures, my Reaper, my White Mage, my whatever, now has menace if I have item shopkeep there. So a pretty good aggressive card if an aggressive equipment deck is playable in limited, and the fact that this is a common means that you're probably going to be able to find a copy of this if you're drafting that archetype. Speaking of pretty decent 3-drop equipment, Samurai's Katana for 2 and a red. We have an artifact equipment at uncommon. It has job select, so this is the first time we've seen job select from this stream. So what that means is when this equipment enters, create a 1/1 colorless hero creature token, then attach this to it. Very similar to things like Living Weapon and For Mirrodin in the past. So what do you get with the equipment? Equipped creature gets +2/+2, has trample and haste, and is a samurai in addition to its other types. And it has an equip cost of 5. So very unlikely that if your opponent is able to kill the creature that this was initially cast or attached to, that you're going to be able to put this on something else. But hasty 3-mana 3/3s do see play in standard. You have Screaming Nemesis, you have Tersa Light Shatter. I think when I was thinking about this card, I think if WotC finally nuts up and bans Monstrous Rage, I think that you could see an argument for the decks that play Tersa right now, deciding to play Samurai's Katana instead of Tersa, if they're like, okay, if I can't play Monstrous Rage, let me play Turn Inside Out, and I'll still have Screaming Nemesis, which is hard to block because they're going to take the damage anyways, and then that's going to turn off like any incidental life gain, and then Samurai's Katana would have trample on it already. So don't sleep on this card. Also, we just talked about Freya into this. You can get this out on turn 2. So this is an example of the type of 3-drop that you might want to look into. Other thing to note, this is technically not a creature, so you could play this in some sort of United Battlefront deck. Right now, the Boros versions of United Battlefront, for 3-drops, they're playing like Caretaker's Talent and Urbrax's Forge. I think you could easily decide to put this into those Boros United Battlefront decks, and this is essentially sort of faking a Collected Company style effect there, because you're actually getting a creature out of it, and it's creating a token. So if you pick this up alongside alongside a Caretaker's Talent, then this also triggers the Caretaker's Talent. So I think this card's pretty playable in standard, even if you're not wanting to put it into just like your mono red aggressive deck. Consider this for your United Battlefront Boros decks. Next up, we have Self-Destruct. For 1 and a red, we have an instant at uncommon. It is target creature you control deals X damage to any other target and X damage to itself, where X is its power. So we've seen fling effects in this current standard be pretty powerful. I mostly play best of 1, so you don't see it as much in best of 1 anymore, since the banning of Leyline of Resonance in best of 1. But it's still, you still see it sometimes. People still end up playing it. I think the fact that this is 2 mana is gonna end up making this on the outside looking in for those decks, because you really want to be playing. You really want to be able to go, okay, I have a mouse or like the Phyrexian Goblin. I'm gonna play another spell, maybe like the Wild Ride or whatever, to give it haste, or I'm gonna play a Monstrous Rage or something like that. I want to be able to like double spell onto this creature and then fling it so that I get my like 21 damage on a single turn. And having something that costs 2 is a little much. The fun part with this card that people brought up when I was looking at other people's reactions is this does like semi-synergize with Screaming Nemesis, because Screaming Nemesis would hit itself and then do the fling, and then because Screaming Nemesis took damage, it would get its own trigger, so it would deal, it kind of makes Screaming Nemesis work a lot like that mouse and the Heartfire Hero and the Phyrexian Goblin. but I don't really think that you want to be flinging a Screaming Nemesis. And I don't think that you're going to play self-destruct just for that synergy. I'm trying to be charitable and maybe like, okay, maybe, you know, you can do the Screaming Nemesis thing to fling the Screaming Nemesis at a creature, and then the triggered ability from Screaming Nemesis at another creature. But I think that's more cute than anything. I think, and so I don't think that this quite makes it to standard. There are other scenarios where this might be a little more interesting. I do want to look at, I do believe Codus has to deal combat damage. So Codus is the Sultai. Yeah, it does have to deal combat damage, so that's unfortunate. But one thing to note is if you have an indestructible creature, unlike normal flings, which sacrifice the creature, if your creature is indestructible, you can fling it, and you're basically just dealing its damage to something or your opponent's face or whatever. How much different is that than just casting like a Rabid Bite? I don't know, but you know. Did somebody pointing out in the chat does have some fun synergy with lifelink, because both the damage that it's dealing to itself and the damage that it deals to whatever other target are coming from the creature. So you would get double the lifelink from there, which is an interesting observation. I think this is more gimmicky than anything else. However, as far as the reference, this is, you can barely see it, but that's Gilgamesh back there, getting exploded. Speaking of uncommon summons, here's, I think, the second one that we've seen spoiled so far. So summon Esper Ramu. For 2 red, we get a enchantment creature, Saga Wizard at uncommon. It is just a 3/3, but it has Judgment Bolt. This creature deals damage equal to the number of non-creature, non-land cards in your graveyard to target creature an opponent controls. And then for chapters 2 and 3, wizards you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. Notably, Esper Ramu is a wizard itself, so on the turn that it gets to attack, it's actually attacking as a 4/3. It's kind of, you know, if you squint really hard, it's Flametongue Kavu. But if you're just like, you know, curving out into Ramu, how many things are you going to have in your how many, you know, non-creature, non-land cards are you going to have in your graveyard? Maybe you curve out and you play the Shinra reinforcements to try and fill your graveyard. Maybe the sort of graveyard matter strategy is in Rakdos, and so you're trying to do that in order to turn this into a Flametongue Kavu, or you just sort of wait a lot longer before you finally decide to play Esper Ramu, so that you can get that Flametongue Kavu-esque effect of shooting one of your opponent's things when this enters the battlefield. Beyond that, if you can't consistently get Judgment Bolt to actually kill something, then I think Esper Ramu is pretty weak. We don't know how much wizard supports there's going to be in limited. We know that there's going to be some, because all the cards that sort of generate black mages make wizards. But is that like the archetype that we're going for here? And if that is, then maybe there's a little bit more on there. But I think you really have to make sure that Judgment Bolt is going to be consistently killing something for this to get the job done. Next up, we have Triple Triad for 3 red, red, red. We have an enchantment at rare. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player exiles the top card of their library. Until end of turn, you may play the card you own, exiled this way, and each other card exiled this way with lesser mana value than it without paying their mana costs. So that's a very powerful effect, but from a standard perspective, 6 mana is a lot of mana. Like, you can try and cheat it out using like Abuelo's Awakening, but if you're gonna go through all the hoops that you need to go through for Abuelo's, just play the Abuelo's Omniscience decks. Don't play Triple Triad. Maybe there's like a big red strategy with like Count on Luck. There's the 2 mana Pia that cares about when you're casting things from exile. But 6 mana is so much for something that makes no impact on the board the turn you play it. Yeah, this is definitely a commander card. I think it's a pretty powerful commander card, but it's a commander card. It's not going to see standard play. Next up, we have Warrior Sword for 3 in a red. We have an artifact equipment at common. It says job select. We've already gone over what that means. And equipped creature gets +3/+2 and is a warrior in addition to its other types, and has an equipped cost of 5. Generic. Probably one of the weakest equipments out there that we've seen. It is common. You're going to get a 3 mana 4/3. If in limited, Boros equipment or red based equipment with I forgot what town merchant or whatever works, then, you know, if this thing also has menace because you're playing that other card, then it gets better, but pretty weak overall. You don't really get anything additional. There are other cards at common that are equipment that you get something on top of it, like the Black Mage's Staff or even the White Mage's Staff. So this is just like a beater. So you really need to be in an aggressive equipment-based strategy that gives you some synergy for playing all this equipment. Next up, Esper Origins. For 1 in a green, we have a sorcery at rare. It has Surveil 2. You gain 2 life, and then if this spell was cast from a graveyard, exile it and then put it onto the battlefield transformed under its owner's control with a finality counter on it. This is our first instance what finality counter is. It just means that when whatever it turns into dies, it gets exiled. And then you also have flashback for 3 in a green. Really, the only reason that they put the finality counter on it, we'll see in a moment, is because this turns into a saga, a summon, and if they didn't put the finality counter on it, then you could technically keep recasting this if it resolved. If it gets countered, then it's going to be exiled, because that's just how flashback works. But if it actually resolved and you didn't put the finality counter on it, then it would technically go back into the graveyard and you could flash it back again. So, just thinking about the front half, Surveil 2 is, you know, kind of close to draw a card. There are green-based strategies in current standard, like Insidious Root stuff, that wants you to dump things into your graveyard, but there are better ways to do that. At 2 mana, there's a ton of better ways to do that at 2 mana. 2 life is it's not really enough to make up for the fact that you spent your turn 2 not really developing to the board or holding up a removal spell in this fairly aggressive format. So we're going to really need to see a big effect from the back half of this. And should note, and we'll talk about it again when we flip. When you do the flashback, even though you're going to also get the summon part of it, you still get the Surveil 2 and Gain 2 from the flashback. So what does this flip into? It flips into Summon Esper Maduin, which is a enchantment creature, Saga Elemental, 4/4 with on its first chapter. So when it enters, you're gonna reveal the top card of your library. If it's a permanent card, put it into your hand. So that's important with the synergy of you getting the first half on the flashback, because you hopefully will be able to sculpt the top of your deck so that you can at least get a land, if not a creature or some other permanent card on the top of your library to actually draw it. Chapter 2, you add 2 green. So if you curve into this on turn 5, you're going to have 7 mana. And then chapter 3, other creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain trample until end of turn. So a nice little overrun effect. This is, again, I think even worse than Jekt and Braska's Final Aeon. The front half is, I think, too weak of a card for you to want to play the back half. And maybe if you can guarantee that the back half is it's already in the graveyard, so you don't have to play the front half twice. But I think even then, 4 mana to get this. Let's think about, okay, if it said 4 mana, reveal the Surveil 2, then Surveil 2, Gain 2, then if it's a permanent card, put it in, if the top card of your library is a permanent card, put it into your hand, or reveal it and put it into your hand, then gain 2 green, and then other creatures you control, etc., etc. If that was just something that you could cast from your hand directly, would that be playable? Maybe. I think that's borderline for green. I would have to look at what green has at 4. You'd want to be a lot more of a mid-ranging green deck than an aggressive green deck. But I think the fact that the card isn't 4 mana, do all that on ETB, that you have to jump through those hoops, probably not there. Next up, we have Galif's Final Act. For 1 on the green, we get an instant at uncommon. It says, until end of turn, target creature gets +1/+0 and gains. When this creature dies, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to its power on up to 1 target creature. So it's not really like, it's not really like a Snakeskin Veil effect, because you're not keeping the creature, but you're kind of keeping the creature. You're keeping the essence of the creature, which I think is probably lore-wise works well with the moment being depicted here. From a standard perspective, you're just gonna want to play Snakeskin Veil rather than this. Like, maybe there are some scenarios where you're trying to, like, you can, turn some other creature that no longer is useful into counters for like your deep cavern bat or something, but that's being very generous on how playable this is. You'd rather actually keep the creature than turn them into counters for something else. It does say target creature. I wonder, is there any sort of value for playing it on your opponent's things? There's something, you get into creature combat, it's going to be a trade, you play it on your opponent's thing and then turn their thing into value on your side. Because it doesn't say target creature you control, and neither does the triggered ability that it adds say. Though I wonder if you do it that way, does that mean that the owner of the creature then chooses the target who gets it? That might actually be what happens at that point, since that creature is the thing that actually has that trigger. So it probably doesn't work the way that I'm thinking of. Yeah, for standard, you're going to want to play Snakeskin Veil. For limited, sometimes you can trade this thing up, and then make your flyer much bigger. But I think pretty situational. Next up, we have Choco, Seeker of Paradise. For a generic, a green, a white, and a blue, we have a legendary creature bird at rare. It is a 3/5 with whenever one or more birds you control attack, look at that many cards from the top of your library. You may put one of them into your hand, then put any number of land cards from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest into your graveyard. And it has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, Choco gets +1/+0 until end of turn. This is a pretty pushed card for an archetype that I don't think has... I disagree that it's just straight up a commander card. Because if we've seen Zaz's Chocobo, we've seen Traveling Chocobo, we've seen Bart's and Boko, I think is what the name of that card was. Bart's and Boko is a pretty powerful card. It's an FTK that you can get out for cheaper because it's got affinity for birds. There is Mockingbird in standard. There is Healer's Hawk in standard. I looked this up yesterday. There were a couple of playable birds in the Bant colors. But they're a little underpowered. But as we keep going through this spoiler season, keep in mind, keep looking for chocobos, keep looking for birds out there, because I think WotC really wants there to be a deck that somebody can make that will do fine at an FNM for people who are just getting into Magic and they're just buying like booster boxes of Final Fantasy cards. And so having a deck that is relatively cheap to put together, or that you can put together from cards that primarily exist in Final Fantasy, this card is, if you can find enough playable birds, this card is very good. You play it on turn 4, it doesn't have to attack, it's just any other bird it is attacking to get the card off of the top. I was joking. Somebody in chat made a comment. Next said, Birds of Paradise. I was making that exact joke that WotC needs to not be cowards and print a Chocobo Birds of Paradise in this set, and then that would be, you know, that would make this insane. You get a Chocobo Birds of Paradise. Bart's is a 3 mana card instead of a 5 mana card. That would be insane. They're not going to do that, but that triggered ability coming off of Choco Seeker of Paradise is very, very powerful. All the lands that you see from there, put it onto the battlefield, gonna trigger, if Choco, you know, if it's past the first round that Choco was in play, Choco then starts swinging in for a ton. It is an attack trigger, so Choco will get the advantage of these landfall triggers. I think that just keep in mind birds as the rest of these spoilers go on, leading up to the release, and then even keep in mind as we go into Edge of Eternities and whatever else. I don't know how many birds there are going to be in Spider-Man, but you know, keep this in mind, because this is a powerful card that I don't think is just a commander card. Next up, we have Zidane, Tantalus Thief. For 3 and a red, 3 a red and a white, we have legendary creature Human Mutant Scout at uncommon. It's a 3/3 with when Zidane enters, gain control of target creature an opponent controls until end of turn. Untap it, it gains lifelink and haste until end of turn. And then whenever an opponent gains control of a permanent from you, you create a treasure token. The theming here is great. You know, Zidane is part of Tantalus. They're a theater troupe, but really they're thieves, and they're like, you know, you're kind of getting ransom from the fact that you active treason your opponent's thing. You get it for a little bit, it swings in for you, and then your opponent pays up for regaining control. The big issue here, pointing out in the chat, is unlike a lot of the versions of this effect that you've seen on creatures, this one has the safety valve of it can only do this target and untap to creatures your opponents control. So there's a card that sees play in many different combos called Zealous Conscripts, which kind of does the same thing on ETBs. It was supposed to be designed to steal something from your opponent, but it could target your own things. So if you Kiki Jiki have some way to infinitely create copies of a Zealous Conscripts, then you can untap your Kiki Jiki or untap the thing that has a Splendor Twin on it, etc., and go infinite there. So this has the opponents only can only target things opponents control clause to work around that. As far as playability, 5 mana is pretty expensive for this. Threaten effects can be good, and the fact that this gives lifelink in addition to haste is pretty good, but I think it's the body on Zidane is a little too weak for 5 mana, even with that threaten effect, and even with gaining the treasure token. I think if Zidane was like a 4/4 or had like, you know, some other keyword on him, then there's a world where Zidane is playable in sort of a slower meta, but right now his body's just too weak. He's gonna die to nowhere to run. He's gonna die to Lightning Helix, etc. And I don't think that there's enough other threaten effects in the standard right now that you'll be able to consistently get that trigger for getting those treasure tokens. I do agree. Pretty great in limited. Next up, we have another one of our towns, Capital City. It's a land town at uncommon. It taps for colorless, and you can filter it into 1 mana of any color by paying a generic, and you can also cycle this for 2. We've seen 1 town synergy card so far, I think in Town Greeter, which is very playable. I don't think that this card's that playable, but if they do try to make towns like gates or towns like caves, and we see some sort of like Gatebreaker Ram or I forget what the name of the like Gates Ablaze, things like that. Those are, you know, another like F&M level decks that you can make and play for like, you know, casual standard level. So the only thing that's really notable about this card is the fact that it's town, and you'll want to keep in mind that there might be more town synergy. Next up is Ishgard the Holy See. Speaking of more towns, we have a land town at rare. This land enters tapped and taps for a single white, and then it's got an adventure, Faith and Grief. For 3 white, we get a sorcery adventure that says return up to 2 target artifacts and/or enchantment cards from your graveyard to your hand. I think this card's pretty good. I don't think all of the adventure lands that we've seen spoiled are that good, but I think Ishgard here slots right into we briefly mentioned it before, though, that either the Azorius or the Boros Battlefront decks, especially the Azorius one, where you're really hinging on your Simulacrum synthesizers, and if your opponent is dealing with your Simulacrum synthesizers, then you only have 4 of them, so you'll eventually run out of ways to sort of close the game out, and so this allows you to get that stuff back and try again. And those decks don't mind not having they already don't really have turn 1 plays. They mostly have turn 2 plays. So the fact that this enters in tapped means you're not as hurt by it. I do agree that the fact that these lands don't tap for multicolors and they enter in tapped is sort of the reason why I don't think like the Xanarkand is that playable. But this one I think already slots into a deck that loves the adventure side of it and is already fine playing tap lands, not needing to have mana available on turn 1. Fine with playing a little bit off curve because you're sort of getting that big tempo swing back with your United Battlefronts. Another town, Rabanasta, the Royal City. We have a land town at common, enters tapped, taps for Boros. Mana fixing in limited. Hints that we're probably getting the full cycle of towns, mana fixing lands like this, rather than the gain lands that we've seen from a lot of sets recently, that also makes me think that there is going to be some sort of town synergy. So I think everything past Rabanasta is going to be cards that are technically standard legal. Well, it's going to be a mix of cards that are technically standard legal, but were either in the no. Cards that are technically standard legal, but come from the starting deck product. So any cards that you're going to see from here on out are generally going to be slightly lower power, because those starter decks are sort of designed to play fairly against each other specifically. So you're unlikely going to see anything is seeing standard play. Mostly we're going to be looking at these because they're going to be, fun references or things of that nature. So here we have Beatrix, Loyal General. For 4 white, we get a legendary creature, human soldier, at rare. Beatrix has Vigilance. She is a 4/4, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may attach any number of equipment you control to target creature you control. 6 mana is pretty expensive. Does have that nice ability to attach equipment, and I believe this is in the Cloud deck of the starter, the starter product, which does have a little bit of an equipment sub theme. So the ability to reattach things that have fallen off because your opponent dealt with the job select creature, or if it didn't have job select, just dealt with the other creature. Totally fine for that type of strategy. Rosa, Resolute White Mage. For 3 and a white, we get a legendary creature, Human Noble Cleric. She is a rare, and she is a 2/3 with Reach. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains lifelink until end of turn. I think if you dropped Rosa 1 mana, she's close to playable in Standard. There was Luminarch Aspirant from way back, I think in Kaldheim, that saw a ton of play at 2 mana, that gave you counters every beginning of combat. Rosa, you could argue that, hey, making it a 2/3 with Reach and making those counters come with lifelink would be enough to bump it up to 2 and a white. At 3 and a white, it's definitely a starter deck. A starter deck card. Ultimacia, Temporal Threat. For 4 blue, we get a legendary creature, Human Warlock, at rare. She also is a 4/4, and when Ultimacia enters, tap all creatures your opponents control, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. That last line is pretty good. Problem is we have Enduring Curiosity already in Standard, which is basically the same stat line for 2 mana less, and has resilience to removal, and has flash. But for this is in the Sephiroth side of that starter deck product. The kind of the blue falter effect. Get your big swing in, refill your hand. Not bad for that type of deck. Next up is Deadly Embrace. For 3 black, we get a sorcery at rare. Destroy target creature an opponent controls, then draw a card for each creature that died this turn. So worst case scenario, it's destroy target creature and cycle this card, because you're going to get at least 1. If you can get more than that, then it starts to get better, but 5 mana. This is definitely a starter deck card. Next up is Seymour Flux. For 5 and a black, we get a legendary creature, Spirit Avatar, at rare. Seymour is a 5/5 that has at the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 1 life. If you do, draw a card and put a +1/+1 counter on Seymour Flux. You know, if the format was a lot slower, this is borderline. A creature that already is a fairly big body, going to consistently draw you cards and grow, but standard, they're Unholy Annex, they're reprinting Bob. There's a lot more. There's a lot better stuff that you can go to, and this is upkeep triggers. But, you know, perfectly fine for the starter product. And I like that we get this version of Seymour. Next up, we have a card that is Judgment Bolt, rather than the chapter that is Judgment Bolt on Ramu, because we got Ramu right here from 16. For 3 in a red, we have an instant at rare. Judgment Bolt deals 5 damage to target creature and X damage to that creature's controller, where X is the number of equipment you control. Works with the equipment sub-theme of the Cloud starter deck. Not much else to talk about here. We have Lightning Security Sergeant. For 2 in a red, we have a legendary creature, Human Soldier. At rare, she is a 2/3 with Menace, and whenever lightning deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card for as long as you control lightning. Not bad. Evasion, 2/3. 2/3 for 3, so a little understated. Is a combat damage trigger, but given the fact that she's got built-in evasion, more likely to be able to get that trigger. And unlike a lot of versions of, you know, impulse draw, you technically have access to this thing for as long as you control lightning. I think the main reason that they do that is because this is a starter deck product, and trying to, for somebody who's entirely new to Magic, getting them to understand what like delay triggers are, and okay, if I attacked with lightning over multiple turns, then having to keep track of, okay, this one here came from last turn, so at the end of this turn I'm not going to be able to have access to it anymore. That's probably too much for like the beginning player. But yeah, I agree. I think that this has potential in, hey, this is good in Prosper. This has potential in Prosper. Zonde Dark Mage. For 2 blue black, we get a legendary creature, Human Wizard, at rare. It is a 3/3 with Menace. And Zonde gets +1/+1 for each non-creature, non-land card in your graveyard. So a big hitter that has some built-in evasion, menace rather than flying. You know, not the worst card in the world. This card's sick. The art is sick, and the reference is sick. As a 14 player. Magitech Scythe. For 4 generic, we have an artifact equipment at rare. It has a test of your reflexes. When this equipment enters, you may attach it to target creature you control. If you do, that creature gains first strike until end of turn and must be blocked this turn if able. Equipped creature gets +2/+1 and it has a equip cost of 2. As far as like an actual card, pretty weak. The only lasting effect that you're going to get from Magitech Scythe is +2/+1 for 4 mana. That's a little much, but you do sort of get that not Elvish Piper, Taunting Elf. You get that Taunting Elf or lure effect from on ETB, and the fact that it gets first strike means that whatever you're forcing, well, I guess it's not Taunting Elf, because it's not all creatures must block this. It's something must block this. So not Taunting Elf. But whatever does end up blocking the creature that Majestic Scythe ends up attaching to probably isn't going to win the fight, considering that it has first strike and +2/+1. But then you lose the surprise, you lose the test of your reflexes going on there, at which point it's a pretty overcosted equipment. Speaking of overcosted equipment, we have Ultima Weapon for 7 generic. We have a legendary artifact equipment at rare. Whenever equipped creature attacks, destroy target creature an opponent controls. Equipped creature gets +7/+7 and has an equip cost of 7. I mean, for a new player, they're going to see this and be like, oh my god, this is the best card ever. That's so much mana over both the equip and the play of the effect. You know, you're gonna if you have like Beatrix out, or if you have some other way to automatically equip it, then it gets a little bit better. But that's so much mana to put in if you don't have a way to pick up the Ultima Weapon. Next up, we have Phoenix Down. I think this was spoiled in the Commander product, but this is a legal for Standard as well. You get for 1 generic white, you get an artifact at uncommon, and it has for 1 and a white, and tap and exile this artifact. Choose one. You can either return target creature with a mana value 4 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, or you can exile target skeleton, spirit, or zombie. Flavor-wise, incredible, right? Just like Phoenix Down, you can either revive a party member, or you can use it offensively against undead. As far as standard playability, I think it's close. You know, Jeskai Oculus, Azorius Oculus, stuff like that. Even like Monument to Endurance decks, they play Helping Hands and recommissions and stuff like that to be able to cheat, either cheat something like an Abhorrent Oculus or like a Haughty Jin or something like that onto the battlefield early. While or recur, you know, an important effect like a Monument to Endurance that might get removed from play. This one, you do get to go up 1 mana value for an extra mana cost, but it only hits creatures, so you're not going to be able to bring back your Monument to Endurances or your Simulacrum Synthesizers or something, or stuff like that. You'd really have to look at what's currently out there in the Standard for 4 mana value stuff that you need to jump through hoops to get into play, rather than just play. Like, sure you can bring back a Shieldred, but for just 1 turn later you can just cast Shieldred. I guess you can sort of play this as insurance against removal. I think the fact that total to do this and break it on a single turn is 3. I think that puts it a little too far out of range. Next up, another card that was from spoiled in the commander products. We have White Aura Sight. For 2 white, we get an artifact at common. It's sort of a banishing light effect. When this artifact enters, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until this artifact leaves the battlefield. But you can also tap it for a white. So is the fact that this is a really expensive mana dork or mana rock that banishing lights enough to justify this being 4 mana? I don't think so. You're not going to be able to hit this off of United Battlefront. There are those white Ugin decks that might play something like this if for whatever reason they don't want to play Hedron Archive, but I think they'd rather play Hedron Archive because it's a colorless spell that could trigger Ugin. There's an argument for something like this in those white Ugin decks as just more removal options, but I think it just loses to Hedron Archive. A card that I think is pretty playable in Standard. Give me a second to drink something. Zach Fair. For a single white, we get a legendary creature human soldier at uncommon. He is a 0/1, but he enters with a +1/+1 counter on him. So he's technically a 1/2. And then you can pay a generic and sacrifice Zach in order to make target creature gain indestructible until end of turn. And then you can put Zach Fair's counters on that creature and attach an equipment that was attached to Zach Fair to that creature. Pretty obviously, the pretty obvious reference here is Cloud picking up Zach's sword and Zach's whole persona. I think this is totally fine as sort of like a different, an onboard Shard Mage's Rescue, essentially. You play Zach early, you're able to get in attacks if you want to, and then you can later on hold Zach, hold up a mana as you're attacking with Zach or whatever to protect your, I forget what the name of the 1-drop eerie creature or like a Heartfire hero or whatever have you. Also a legendary, so in my head there's a potential for like an Orzhov Legends deck with Aerith, Sephiroth, Ellis Ilkor, Amalia, and now Zach as a 1-drop to protect one of those creatures as you sort of get your synergy stuff going off, and then, you know, break Aerith when the time is right in order to get this big overrun effect for all your legendaries. So I'd keep an eye on this card. I'm gonna try and brew with this card in the Standard, but yeah. Next up is Astrologian's Planisphere. For 1 and a blue, we get an artifact equipment at rare. It has job select. Equipped creature is a wizard in addition to its other types, and has whenever you cast a non-creature spell and whenever you draw your 3rd card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. One thing to note with this card is stock up is not drawing cards. Stock up is you look at the top 5 cards of your library and you put 2 cards from among those cards into your hand. It doesn't say draw, so it's not a draw effect. Even with that in mind, I think this card's potentially very good. if you don't want to play red for whatever reason, but you do want to play prowess, this is essentially not even essentially, this is a prowess creature, but its counters are permanent. You could just play this alongside Quarry Steelcutter for another prowess creature. I think probably Slickshot Show Off beats it, but an argument if you'd rather play this than something like Drake Hatcher, and the equip cost being only 2, it's not that, just like Quarry Steelcutter, it's not that out of the realm of possibility to have something else pick this up and start getting a bunch of 1/1 counters. Should note that it makes a wizard, so if you're playing some sort of like Grixis pile with Kuja, then this is another wizard to go along your count to be able to flip Kuja over to its backside. I think this is a pretty playable card in standard. Might get crowded out by a lot of other good 2-drops, but keep an eye on this card. Next up, we have Sage's Noliths for 1 and a blue. We have an artifact equipment at common. Hold on one second. Had a lot of meetings at work today, so all this extra talking is making my throat a little sore. But we're pretty close to being done with this review. Let me look. I think this is the 4th to last card, so I'll power through this. I did. I drank some water when I muted. So Sage's Noliths for 1 and a blue. We have an artifact equipment at common. It has job select, and equipped creature gets +1/+0. It has whenever this creature attacks, untap target attacking creature, and is a cleric in addition to its other types, and it equips for 3. Pretty generic limited card. You get a 2/1 for 2 on there. If you're willing to, you can kind of use this as a, hey, let me get this in to make sure that my big flyer or my biggest creature that's attacking can also has pseudo vigilance, but you're really only going to get 1 shot at this. And equip 3 is probably borderline on what you'd want to spend to let your to have this equipped to something else. So I don't know, probably one of the weaker equipment, even at common. Next up is Circle of Power for 3 and a black. We get a Lalafell in a very large Circle of Power there. It's a sorcery at uncommon. It says you draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. Create a 0/1 black wizard creature token with whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this token deals 1 damage to each opponent. And wizards you control get +1/+0 and gain lifelink until end of turn. So we saw that Ramu cares about wizards. We see that Circle of Power cares about wizards. So there's probably a wizard sub thing going on here. Other thing to note is these black mages, these little 0/1 black wizards, when they're pinging each opponent as you're casting non-creature stuff, If it's the turn that you cast Circle of Power, you're also gaining life through that damage. So plus you also draw 2 and lose 2. So, you know, not a terrible card in limited, especially if you're able to get advantage of the wizard's typing. Next up is Barrett Wallace. For 3 in a red, we have a legendary creature, Human Rebel, at uncommon. He is a 4/4 with reach, and whenever Barrett Wallace attacks, it deals damage equal to the number of equipped creatures you control to defending player. Just remember that all these job select cards technically are equipped creatures. Even then, like maybe, because we still have 4 Mirrodin, so maybe there's a 4 Mirrodin job select aggressive deck that has Barrett kind of act like a Fanatic of Mogus effect, to kind of like get that last bit of reach over the top for your opponent. I think almost certainly just play mono red if you're wanting to do something like that, or even, you know, Boros Auras or something like that. But if you want to be special, there's a possibility for something like Barris. He does block Slickshot show-offs pretty well. Really trade with Slickshot show-offs, though they have to dump 2 spells into it, so, and then it'll die anyways. So a pretty good blocker for Slickshot show-off, but 4 mana. You're really playing it for, oh, I guess it's on attack. It's not on ETB, so it's not even a Fanatic of Mogus. Nah, never mind. He's not even not there for standard. Next up, we have Laughing Mad. For 2 in a red, we get an instant at common. As initial cost to cast this spell, discard a card, draw 2 cards, and a flashback of 3 in a red. I think I've heard that this is a functional reprint of another card, like specifically even all the way to the point where it has flashback for 3 in a red. I don't remember what the other card is, but a instant, you know, a Thrill of Possibility that costs 1 more but has flashback. I think even in non-blue decks these days, you can probably do better than this. Like Rakdos Reanimator, you've got Fear of Missing Out to dump your big reanimation targets into your graveyard. You've got I forget what the name of the enchantment is, the red enchantment that you can also sack to give your creatures haste, like Bitter Reunion, that's what it's called. And I think that's only 2 mana. You've got better options than playing this. Perfectly fine for limited, but for standard playability, there's better options. Electric Revelation, hold in chat for what it's a functional reprint of. And that's our last one. There's been a couple of other, well, I shouldn't say a couple. There's been a number of other Through the Ages cards. I talked at the beginning of the stream that depending on how long the stream was gonna go, we could have looked at those. I'm gonna skip on looking at those. But yeah, as far as what we've seen so far, there's been a couple of good ones. I think Astrologian's Planisphere is pretty playable. I think Zach Fair is pretty playable. There's been a couple of huge whiffs. I think Vincent Valentine's a pretty big whiff. Moogle's Valor is a huge whiff. But it's still looking fun. It's still looking like a fun set, and obviously, you know, being both a Final Fantasy fan and a Magic the Gathering fan, still enjoying the set. So, with that, we're going to call it into the stream. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Riddle of Lightning, for chiming in. Abaddon from earlier for chiming in the chat. And anyone else who might have just been lurking, you're appreciated as well. Probably going to be a couple days in order to rebuild the queue of standard cards to look at, so we have more to talk about at once, rather than, you know, a small little stream just to talk about a few cards. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you whenever I see you.